Hello YouTube. In this video, I will be explaining the meaning of the word sujood using the Quran alone. Muslims claim that sujood means putting your forehead on the ground towards the cube in Mecca during prayer. I will present Quranic proofs to show that the word sujood cannot mean putting your forehead on the ground, let alone in the direction of a cube in Mecca. Before we proceed, I want to reiterate that I follow the Quran alone and consider it to be fully detailed and clear per verses 7.52, 6.114, and 15.1. The word sujood occurs many times in the Quran. It has many variants such as yasjudan, sajadan. It is beyond the scope of this video to go over all the variants, but they are there for grammatical purposes such as they do sujood or in sujood, etc. In my analysis, I have left the word sujood and its variants, sajadan, yasjudan, as untranslated to help you see the trickery by traditional translators. The following translation is by Yusuf Ali. You can look up your favorite translation if you wish. Chapter 2, verse 58. And remember, we said, enter this town and eat of the plenty therein as you wish, but enter the gate sajadan, in posture and in words, and we shall forgive you your faults and increase those who do good. Now let's see how Yusuf Ali translates the word sajadan. Chapter 2, verse 58. And remember, we said, enter this town and eat of the plenty therein as you wish, but enter the gate with humility, in posture and in words, and we shall forgive you your faults and increase those who do good. Yusuf Ali is forced to translate sajadan as humility, as the command would make no sense otherwise. Would God order the Jews to enter the gate with their forehead dragging across the ground, especially since there were enemies in the town? However, we shall see in the next verse Yusuf Ali has no problem translating sajadan as prostration. Chapter 20, verse 70. So the magicians were thrown down sajadan. They said, we believe in the Lord of Aaron and Moses. Chapter 20, verse 70. So the magicians were thrown down to prostration. They said, we believe in the Lord of Aaron and Moses. So right here we can see the trickery being applied. In one verse, sajadan is being translated as humility, and then the other verse, that same word is being translated as prostration. This is unfortunately the modus operandi of translators when they encounter a word that does not fit with their agenda. Even a common sense reading of chapter 20, verse 70 cannot come to the conclusion that the magicians threw themselves with their foreheads on the ground facing Mecca. How does that make any sense? Yet, millions of Muslims have been duped into putting their forehead on the ground facing Mecca during Salat because they do not apply the reason and intelligence to the Book of God. Please look at my Salat video if you are interested in finding out the meaning of Salat using the Quran. Here is another Yusuf Ali's translation to challenge your understanding of Sujood, chapter 55, verse 6, and the herbs and the trees both yasjudan. Chapter 55, verse 6, and the herbs and the trees both prostrate in adoration. Have you seen any herb and tree putting their forehead on the ground? How does this make any sense? Unfortunately, God's scriptures have been made a mockery of by changing the actual meaning of words. So now we have demonstrated that sajad as putting your forehead on the ground cannot be sustained in the preceding verses. I advise you to go through every occurrence of sajad and its variants in the Quran and see if you can make it fit with your preconceived idea of sajad. Here is a hint on what sujood really means in the Quran. Chapter 16, verse 48. Have then they never considered any of the things that God has created? Their shadows turn right and left, sajadan to God, and utterly submissive. Chapter 3, verse 113. They are not all alike. Among the followers of earlier revelation, there are upright people who recite God's messages throughout the night, and they yasjadun. So, what does the word actually mean? It means to submit. And how do we submit? That question is also answered in the Quran, chapter 84, verse 21. And when the Quran is read to them, they do not yasjudan. Applying our correct understanding of sajad, we get chapter 84, verse 21. And when the Quran is read to them, they do not submit. So, We are to submit to the guidance of our Lord, which is in the Quran. If we are being arrogant and rejecting the Quran, then we are not submitting. Chapter 32, verse 15. Only they believe in our messages who, whenever they are conveyed to them, fall down submitting and extol their sustainers' limitless glory and praise, and who are never filled with false pride. Chapter 76, verse 26. And part of the night submit thyself to him, and glorify him a long night through. Chapter 68, verse 43. Their eyes will be humble, humiliation covering them, and they had been invited to submit when they were whole. Chapter 68, verse 44. So leave thou me with those who repudiate this narrative. We will lead them by degrees without them knowing. Finally, I want to dispatch of the claim by traditional Muslims who still insist that putting your forehead on the ground is the meaning of sujood. Coming from a traditional Muslim background myself, I was taught how to do sujood by my elders. Here is what the Quran has to say about this. Chapter 2, verse 170. And if they are told, follow what God has sent down, they say, no, we will follow what we found our fathers doing. What if their fathers did not comprehend anything and were not guided? Indeed, in this verse is great wisdom for all of us. I will leave you with the final verse to ponder. Chapter 48, verse 28. Muhammad is God's messenger, and those who are truly with him are firm and unyielding against the atheists, full of mercy towards one another. Thou canst see them lowly, sujadan, seeking favor with God and goodly acceptance, their marks on their faces in the wake of the sujood. That is their parable in the Torah, and their parable in the Gospel. They are like a seed that brings forth its shoot and grows stout, and in the end stands firm upon its stem, delighting the sowers. Thus will God cause the believers to grow in strength, so that through them he might enrage the atheists. Those who attain to faith and do righteous deeds, God has promised forgiveness and a reward tremendous. Is this the mark of sujood? Or is the mark of sujood more akin to a spiritual strength that comes from submitting to God's commands and that enrages the disbelievers?